Welcome back to another episode of A Double-Edged Sword. So, let's take a look at Nintendo's newest IP, ARMS, that launched on their brand new console, the Switch. This was a game that, on paper, I really liked the idea, but in execution, it just didn't look that good. But as time went on and we learned more about the game, it became more enticing. This was also helped by the fact that Nintendo held a global test punch, which is basically an open beta, that actually went over pretty well in my opinion. And by the time the game came out, I was actually pretty excited for it. But just because I was positive about the game before release, doesn't mean I didn't have my worries.
Disclaimer. None of the footage used in this video is my own. It's taken from Vinesauce, link in the description and at the end of the video.
So let's talk about controls. There are several different ways you can control your character in ARMS, but I want to focus on motion controls and just the standard controls / pro controller. Both of these control schemes definitely work, but I think one is better than the other. The motion controls literally have you throwing punches to punch in the game. Shielding is done by facing both controllers inwards, and in my experience, it doesn't always work. You move around the arena by tilting your controller, kind of like you would a flight stick, and everything else is just mapped to the top buttons, your special, jumping, dashing, all that jazz. With button controls, you can either throw punches with A and B or the back triggers. Movement is controlled with the left stick, which also gives you control of your punch trajectory. Jumping and dashing are controlled with X and Y. Shielding has you pushing down the left stick, and specials are activated with both the front triggers. In my opinion, motion controls give you the advantage of better controls over your punch trajectory, while button controls give you better stage control, and between the two, I definitely prefer button controls. But I see why they both exist, and I see why people would prefer one over the other, and it is nice that Nintendo actually gave us the option to switch between the two. The one thing I do want from the controls, however, is the ability to customize your button layout. I feel like that would be very useful overall, because even though the controls do a great job, which they kind of have to for a fighting game, I just want that more. So I'm gonna give controls a great. ARMS is a mostly online game, so a lot of this segment is going to focus on that. I'm going to go through each mode based on the frequency of appearance. So first we have the standard 1v1 mode, which is obviously the main mode of the game. You compete against a single opponent in a single stock, sometimes two stock match. There's also items like bombs and restores that occasionally show up to add surprises. This mode works great, I have no problem with it whatsoever. What I do have a problem with is the second most common mode, 1v1v1, or the 3-player mode. I hate this mode so goddamn much. So, how this works is there are always 3 players. It's always unbalanced. And 9 times out of 10, what happens is 2 of the players teams up against the 3rd player until they're finished off, and then turn whatever remaining time is left into a 1v1 match. Because of this unbalance, this is never fun, and it always feels tedious. The thing is, though, I wouldn't have a big problem with this, except for the fact that it is the second most common mode in the game. And depending on when you play, it can even be the most common. After a while, I just got so sick of it, and it's not going to do this game's final score any good. Next up, we have V-Ball, which is a fine mode. It's a twisted game of volleyball that works fine. Some ARMS are definitely better than others, however. This mode can also rarely show up in a 2v2 format. Then we have the Headlock, which is what the 1v1v1 should have been. And I wish this was more common than the 1v1v1. Basically, 2 to 3 players fight a headlock that has 6 arms, and if you kill it, you win, but if you don't, you lose. Even though headlock can be a pain in the ass to kill, especially on higher levels, I only ever saw it at level 6 and 7. This mode is actually a lot of fun. It might even be my favorite mode in the game. The 2v2 mode is basically a multiplayer version of 1v1 where you work together, but by tethering the teams together, it tends to form a single-esque unit. It does manage to feel balanced while having a larger number of players, but it can get annoying if you fight enemies that focus on grabs. But I don't really hold that against this mode, because you see grabs a lot in all the other modes. Skill Shot is just a simple target practice. While playing it, I definitely noticed that you should focus on getting combos on your opponents more than hitting the targets. Also, if you get too far behind, it is almost impossible to catch up. This mode also occasionally shows up in the 2v2 format. Then there's Hoops, which has you grabbing the opponent to slam dunk them into a basketball hoop. For the most part, this mode works well, but I have definitely seen that you are at a disadvantage if you play as a heavy character. There is one more mode, however, and even though I played it during the Global Test Punch, I was convinced that this mode didn't actually exist. That being the 1v1v1v1 or the 4-player mode. After owning this game for a week, I had played a single 4-player match, and since then I haven't played another one. Even though this mode is rare from what little I've played of it, it actually seems to work pretty well. You'd expect it to be annoying like the 1v1v1, but it ends up devolving into basically 2 1v1 matches, and then the winners of those 2 matches compete up against each other, kind of like a mini tournament. Again, this could just be from my very little experience, but I haven't seen anything else to prove me otherwise because it never shows up. Now, apart from the standard online mode, there's other modes like Grand Prix, ranked battles, 1 versus 100, and these modes all work fine, but this game lives and dies based on its online, in my opinion, and with all these modes taken into account, I'm going to give it an okay. So let's talk about the characters. Now, me and many other people have said that ARMS is the fighting game equivalent of Overwatch, which is an apt comparison that I believe stems entirely from this game's roster. This game has 10 unique fighters that represent a variety of different races, genders, and even species. On top of that, out of the 10 fighters, there's not a single one I dislike. They all have their pros and cons, and I've all had fun playing as each of them. Each character has a special ability that gives them a varied playstyle, so you can find one you like. From Ribbon Girl's multiple jumps, to Helix being able to expand and contract, and Master Mummy being able to regenerate health. There are also 30 plus arms that can be switched out, and a variety of different weight classes and special attributes. While each character starts off with 3 arms, you are able to unlock more, but this process can take a long time. They are also going to be adding more characters and arms in upcoming DLC, so admittedly, the small-ish roster will become greater as time goes on, but for the moment, I'm going to give characters a great. So let's talk about the stages. In the main mode, there are 10 stages. There are definitely some stages I like more than others, but there's no stage I really hate. Something interesting that I noticed was in the online party mode, I almost never played Master Mummy stage, but while in the local multiplayer mode, I only ever played Springman stage, Ribbon Girl stage, Helix's stage, and Ninjara stage, which I do find interesting. Of course, this is when I picked random. Other than that, there is one stage that is exclusive to the Grand Prix, for now, but it'll probably come in later DLC. There are also stages specifically designed for V-Ball, Skillshot, and Hoops that are made specifically for those modes, so they do exactly what you expect. While I do wish there were more stages, maybe DLC will fix this later on down the line, who knows. But for now, I'm going to give stages a good. So, let's talk about the graphics. This game is stylized in such a way that it does look aesthetically pleasing. It looks good on both TV mode and in portable mode. The game also runs at a smooth 60 frames per second, while both frame rate and resolution drop while playing split screen. It really wasn't that much of an issue, so I'm gonna give graphics a good. So, let's talk about the music. It's very upbeat and positive. It makes you want to keep playing, especially that main theme, which is really enjoyable. It's not all perfect. Some tracks are definitely more memorable than others, but the good definitely outshines the bad, so I'm going to give it a good. So let's talk about length. Out of everything I've talked about in this video, this is the most important. Being an online-focused game, I'm kinda worried about how long ARMS is going to keep me entertained. Most sane people can only play the same type of matches for so long before getting bored and moving on to something else. So far, I've only played ARMS for a little less than 20 hours, but I'm already worried it's going to lose my interest. If we go outside of online mode, there's the Grand Prix mode, which while it's fine fighting 10 matches, then a boss, after you beat it at max difficulty, there's no real reason to come back. It honestly feels like that obligatory offline mode we see in games like the original Titanfall and Evolve. There's ranked battle for the competitive obsessed, but in my experience it took forever to get into a ranked battle, but luckily it lets you play other modes in between matches, so I'm not going to complain. If you're a completionist nut, you can collect all the arms for all the different fighters. By the way, that's over 650 arms. But most people aren't completionists. There is also local multiplayer to play with your friends, which admittedly can be fun, but all of this can only keep you entertained for so long. What I expect to happen to ARMS is that it'll become a podcast game. Please tell me I'm not the only one that does this. But basically, I listen to a variety of podcasts. One day every week, I listen to all my podcasts, usually while playing a game. In the past, it's been games like Civilization, Minecraft, and even the original Splatoon. So far, it looks like ARMS is going to fit right in with all of these games, and I'll play it once a week, or at least until Splatoon 2 comes out. The only other things ARMS has going for it to extend its length, much like Splatoon, is the future free DLC. Of course, how much DLC there will be, and how often it'll be, well, only time will tell. So with all this going into account, I'm going to give length a good, but this is subject to change with future DLC announcements. When it was first revealed, ARMS was a game that did not impress me. As time went on, I became more and more interested in the game, but the one thing I always wanted was a story mode, which never happened. Sure, we got hints about the grander world of ARMS in the ARMS Direct and on the ARMS Twitter, but we never got the story mode I really wanted. Now earlier in this video, I mentioned games like Titanfall and Evolved, which the more I think about it, the more ARMS resembles. Let me explain. With all three of these games, I played the beta, which I really enjoyed, and I was convinced to buy the full game. Once I bought the full game, however, I played it for a while and had a lot of fun. But after a while, I got bored and just never came back. I'm worried ARMS is going to follow this same path. My only hope is upcoming DLC, which will hopefully reinvigorate my enthusiasm in the game, but for the moment I'm skeptical. Overall, I am going to give ARMS a good, with the high hopes of what's to come in the future.